Salam and welcome, everybody. I would like to begin my remarks tonight by acknowledging once again the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all standing on right now, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that to any First Nations people here with us today. As a Hazara, as a refugee Hazara, it is so much more important that we recognize the genocide of the First Nations people. The pain, our pain and their pain are quite similar. And for us to realize that the settlement that we benefit from today here in this land has been built on injustices done to them, and that we should be standing with them in that struggle for self-determination. You've all heard why we've all gathered here today, what the significance of a 40th day of mourning is, what the significance of the Chilum event is, although not the 40th day to the count, but I believe the event was also postponed a week due to weather conditions. So thank you all for being here and coming despite Melbourne's weather. Today we're gathering once again to mourn and grieve together, to share in each other's pain and agony, because it's non-stop. It's happening way too often, way too regularly. We've come together in solidarity with each other, with our kin, with our family members, with our sisters, brothers, no matter which part of the world they have been displaced to. But we also come together here today to raise our voices and say enough is enough. How much more can we endure? How much more can the people take? How much more can Hazaras take? On September 30th this year, we were all shaken to our core once again as we woke up to the news of the tragic, brutal, but cowardly act that took nearly 60 young Hazara lives from us. And as you heard just now from Farishta Jan, each of those lives taken was an aspiring doctor, scientist, engineer, writer, artist, leader, who had all gathered together in a crowded classroom in pursuit of education, practicing for a university exam. Their lives were taken when they were pursuing the most sacred entity, and their crime being a Hazara. Most of the young students who lost their lives that day were young girls, because the coward suicide bomber detonated himself in the crowded classroom where the segregation of genders have been established by the Taliban, who took over the country last year. But killing of our children, killing our youth, is a special kind of evil. A calculated, vicious, sinister, purest form of hatred. A systemic and systematic act of erasure. Afghanistan's history is one of the most complex and intricate in the world, with centuries of foreign interferences, invasions and occupations, all because of its geopolitical significance in the region, and various superpowers and their pawns have come and had a piece of the country. And the Hazaras have borne the brunt of all of that, at least since the establishment of the Afghanistan as a modern state dating back to 1890s. Our history as Hazara people is riddled with ethnic cleansing, mass dispossession, forced displacement, social economic exclusion, and our constant struggle for recognition, our constant struggle for self-determination, our constant struggle for justice, no matter where we have been in the world. It's a pain that unfortunately each and every one of us here today is familiar with, but not immune to, because it's a pain that we don't get used to. It hurts and it burns just as much every single time. Every one of us here today have picked up the phone every time there is an attack. We call our loved ones, we call those we have left behind, and we desperately wish to hear a hello on the other end, because we don't know if we would or no. They have come for our young, they have come for our old. They've come for our men, our women, even our unborn babies. They've come at our homes, our schools, our mosques, our workplaces, our roads. Nowhere has been left safe for us. But this genocide is not a new phenomenon. And I really want to stress that. We don't want this to be diluted by what happened in Afghanistan last year, in August last year, when the Taliban forcibly took over. The genocide and the justice, recognition of justice, or the battle for recognition of these cowardly and genocidal violence is not new. And it's not limited to Afghanistan as well. In Iran, where majority of the people from Afghanistan who have been displaced are Hazaras, they're treated as second-class citizens, barred from education and employment, deployed to fight Iran's dirty war in Syria, because the alternative is their families getting deported. In Pakistan, despite Hazaras living there for nearly 2 centuries, they're still treated as second-class citizens, and target killings have always been a reality that those of us who come from Pakistan are very well familiar with. In Australia, according to Census 2021, there are nearly 42,000 of us, nearly 42,000 Hazaras in Australia. And that number is severely underreported. Why? Because when for generations your identity has been used as a weapon against you, when you and your ancestors have repeatedly been shown that your existence is not welcome in the world, you learn to hide your identity very well. You internalize your own oppression and you disconnect with your roots. There are some members of the community here who put a really well thought and well executed campaign together last year, raising awareness and education to record ourselves as Hazaras when census was carried out. Hazaras constitute one of the largest ethnic groups of asylum seekers here in Australia, and therefore subject to Australia's harshest and most punitive asylum and refugee policies here in Australia. The majority of those who are suffering on temporary protection visas are Hazaras. So no, the genocide is not in Afghanistan only. Our people are not only dying in Afghanistan, they're not only being targeted in Afghanistan. The pain follows us wherever we have gone. The policies continue to impact us no matter where we are. When we talk of genocide, we don't just mean mass murders and killing of our kin and our loved ones in cold blood. We also mean systemic erasure of our existence in the world. We also mean destruction of our culture, our art heritage, our mother tongue, our way of life, and forced removal and displacement from our ancestral lands. Today, Hazaras are scattered across the world and speak multiple dialects of Hazaragi language, and many who don't even speak it at all. Generations like myself have been displaced and grown up in exile, away from our own ancestral lands and our way of life, never knowing or feeling home anywhere. If we cannot feel home in Afghanistan, what hope is it there for other countries in the world? We've never had the privilege to go about life speaking in our own language. We've been separated from our families, our loved ones, separated from our ancestral love and wisdom. We've been forced to learn and adapt to other cultures, whether that has been in Afghanistan or outside, over and over again. And at times, we have internalized that so much that we're ashamed at times of our own roots because of what the world has done to us every time we have shown our identity. But there is another truth to it. Hazaras are the most hardworking, driven, entrepreneurial, progressive, equality and justice-seeking people, not just in Afghanistan, but here. Take a look yourself in Dandenong right now. Everywhere that Hazaras have called home, they have excelled in every field that they have participated in. There is a drive, there is a hunger for success in Hazaras. And for our guests who have come to join us here in solidarity today, this is the face of multicultural Australia. When we say that we're proud of the diversity of the people in multicultural Australia, we should also show up, like you have today, for each other and share in each other's pain. Because the Hazara people of Afghanistan share close ties with Australians, including family ties, common values like love for education. Our young ones, our children, our youth are dying because of our love for education, because it's that education that is going to get us in those systems where we can make changes for ourselves. And that's what people don't want. Australia spent 2 decades in Afghanistan helping the people of Afghanistan strengthen these values and found eager friends in Hazaras because the values are the same. We want the same for Afghanistan. These ties of kinship, shared values, and this special relationship that Australia has had with Afghanistan for the last 20 years, they do raise moral and ethical, but also legal obligations for Australia. This is not an issue of Afghanistan. This is not just something that the Hazara diaspora come together every now and then. This is very real. This is a real issue here in Australia that needs to be addressed. I do want to take this opportunity to especially thank the Greater Dandenong City Council for passing a motion to recognise the Hazara genocide. Leading by example. That's what allyship is. That's what solidarity is. We thank you because we feel seen, we feel heard. Yes, it might not be something that the Dandenong Council alone can tackle, but from small drops, we can create oceans, we can create waves. And on that note, I also want to thank the Queensland Labor Council who has passed a motion as well, an official motion in recognition of this genocide. Alongside those, here today, the community who have gathered now, the community who gathered here nearly 40 days ago on the 9th of October, in 5,000 or more than 5,000 of us who gathered here that day, we were calling for the same thing. No matter where we were, in Melbourne, in Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, across Australia. We're calling on the Australian government to formally recognise and condemn the dramatic escalation of violence against the Hazara people in Afghanistan as genocide. And it takes little actions from each and every one of us here tonight. A small show of solidarity, a small post on social media, an interview with the media here and there, it all adds up. We're also asking the Australian government to convene an emergency roundtable with the Australian Hazara community to hear about our grave concerns that the Australian Hazara community here hold for our family members, for our loved ones and relatives in Afghanistan. Those of us who are on SHEV and TPV, as of yesterday, there have been some restrictions lifted, but they have been barred from seeing their family members for over 10 years, from ever having the chance to reunite, to rebuild their lives here in Australia. Some of us here may have lost family members in the recent attack. We've also asked the Australian government and Australian politicians to form a parliamentary friendship group to focus on issues of the Hazara community, both in Afghanistan and here in Australia, because these issues aren't isolated to Afghanistan. And on that note, I do have a message for our community members as well. We desperately and ruthlessly need to unite and need to get behind each other. We need to, because our power and our strength lies in our unity. Don't let the enemies of 2 centuries ago still win in their vision, because that genocide of 2 centuries ago is still active and it's still following us. Earlier, this is a little something to finish on. The MCs here read out the Saugantnama of the Kaj students, and what that meant was the oath that the students at the Kaj Learning Centre took. And before I read out the Saugantnama, or the oath for you, I do want to also point out the significance of Kaj and what Kaj actually means. There's a pine tree here. Kaj is a pine tree. And the significance is that it displays immortality and eternal life because it retains its leaves throughout winter. It remains strong. And I cannot find a better metaphor for what the Hazara people have been through and for how they come up, they stand up time and time again and continue on our journey for justice and recognition. The Kaj oath that the students take at the Kaj Learning Centre every day goes like this. As a turning point of the new generation, an enlightened generation, a generation tired of bullets and guns, I promise to myself and my fellow companions that I will not give in to life's obstacles. For a diligent society, a mighty society, an open and enlightened society, I will try harder than anyone else. And that extends to each and every one of us here today. We need to try harder than anyone else for ourselves and for those who come after us. Thank you.